everybody, I'm Dusk. Welcome to Realm of the Sacred Roots. I wanted to talk to you today about working with human skulls in necromancy. But before I do, I wanted to say thank you to all my new subscribers. I really appreciate you all subscribing and supporting my videos. Well, I wanted to talk first about being a natural witch or a natural spiritualist. You can put whatever word or term you want in that placeholder. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk first about not having formal training. I never really had any formal training in the art. I did everything by instinct or intuition, by feeling what it was that I should do. And so that's how I was self-taught. So when I would go into cemeteries as a younger girl, I would just go, I'd stop at the gate as I walked through. I would say a prayer. I would talk to the spirits there, let them know what my intentions were, that I'm here as a friend and I just wanted to be amongst them. That's kind of how I would start my entrance into the cemetery. And then I'd walk around and I'd put my hand on mausoleums. I'd get the names of the spirits that were there, and I would try to see what else I could know about the spirits that were there. That's kind of how I did it. I'd leave and go home. And I guess now there are formal ways of how people will go in. There are all different types of ways that people choose to go into the cemetery, where you stop at the gate, you ask for entrance or permission before you go in. A lot of people leave pennies, some leave silver coins, some people cover their heads, others don't, because they feel like that will protect them from spirits jumping on them maybe and following them back home. So I wanted to show you that as an example, that even within a formalized way of how you would enter, everybody has their own way on how they choose to ask permission or set their intent before they go in, how they respect the spirits at the grave. They ask if they can take grave dirt and wait for that type of release from the spirit, or a yes or no, and then they would go ahead and proceed. And then some people leave out backwards, some people leave out of the cemetery forward. So everyone has their own ways, and my whole point in this little intro is that everybody has to do it the way you feel is appropriate for you. Someone doing it one way may not be the same way I would personally do it. The way I used to do it worked just fine for me. The more knowledge you learn, the more you learn how to respect spirits. You can always add to your tool box other techniques that you want to add that you think might work for you. Give them a try. But my whole point in mentioning that is this disclaimer of everybody does things different, and nobody should want you to do it exactly the way they do it. You should personalize all of your workings. I don't recommend anyone do a working exactly the way I've done my workings. You personalize it to your own effect, what works best for you. So my disclaimer for working with skulls in necromancy is everybody has their own way on how they consecrate their ritual tools, on how they select their skulls, on how they work with spirits. This is the way I work with my skulls and my spirits. This is just how I work with them, so I wanted to share that with you. But like the example that I gave you, everybody has their own way, and you can take my way and modify it to what works and what feels right for you and your path and for what you're studying. Okay, so I wanted to make that little disclaimer. I initially started this journey of bones and skulls. I've always been attracted to bones and skulls, all kinds of bones, animal bones, human bones. I love bones. And so I started with animal bones, and I started with skulls of animals that I was already connected to. So I have a connection with bears, more on the shaman side, and wolves. So I started with those skulls first. And what I would do is I would meditate and I close my eyes and I would feel the object. A lot of people say that that's part of your empath gifts, that you can feel something, the energy that something puts off. But a lot of people also say it could be psychometry, which is another way of basically, it's more of this paranormal term, right, of a gift, psychometry, where you can touch an object, feel an object, meditate on that object, and then you can get some feedback from it. You can basically, I guess people say, and let me read you exactly what it says, is that some people that support this ability actually assert that an object may have an energy field that basically that stays with them, or that they leave some type of knowledge behind regarding the object's history. So they're saying that people like us who are gifted can touch an item, and that spirit may have departed, but they left some type of energy or residue, as we call it, back on that item. So some people say that's what we're picking up, and other people say we're picking up the actual spirit that could still be associated with that object, bone, or skull. So either way, for me, I am able to pick it up. Some people say you can, because there are some people that doubt that ability, and they're probably not in our field. And then there's some people that say you can do that. When I would meditate with the animal skulls, I would see flashes of what they saw in the wild. I would feel some of their emotions sometimes. So I started to make a connection with the actual animal skull. Now, hang in here with me, because I'm not yet to human skulls, but I wanted to tell you how I started with this and with bones. So I started to realize I could have a connection with the animal, even though it was just the skull. I was still able to connect with the animal, and each skull had their own feel. Each skull, I felt, still had their own spirit attached to it. Some skulls I was actually attracted to more, and I liked the spirit and the feel of that skull. And others I wasn't so keen on, I wasn't so fond of. And it made me say, I might not work with that one for this purpose or for that purpose. So that's important to know. It takes time. You have to meditate. It takes time to learn that skill if you don't already have it, but it's well worth it. So after I started working with animal skulls, I started to get excited about human skulls. Now, mind you, animal skulls can be expensive. They can be $3, $4, $5, even more, $100. Human skulls are even more. They're between maybe $1,200 to $1,500, if not more, for a human skull. Sometimes you can get the medical skulls that have been cut up and, with the different, I'm not sure quite what you call it, but they're the medical skulls that you'll see. Or you can just get a human skull with the top part and the jawbone part together, and sometimes just the top part. There are alternatives I'll talk about after if you can't get a real skull, because they are expensive. You can save up, you can put money away for a real skull. You don't necessarily have to have a real skull. I've never worked with one that wasn't, but you don't have to have one. So I'll deal with that in a minute. So as you're choosing one, I bought a few, but I have a couple that are medical skulls, and then a couple that are not. And I've bought a couple online and some in just face to face. So of course it's always better if you can hold the skull and touch the skull. If you can't and you buy it online, then look at the picture of the skull and ensure you're attracted to the skull before you even embark on purchasing it, just because you're excited to purchase the skull. Ensure that you have an attraction to the skull first and that you want to work with this skull. So you get your skull, you get it home. I introduce myself to my skull. I do, and I do it with all of my items. I do it with all of my bones. I do it with all of my relics. Almost all items that I bring into my space, I do an introduction. I let everybody know, where they're at, whose place it is, and, I have a purpose for you. And eventually I'll tell them what their purpose is. So that's what I do. I introduce myself. I tell them why I'm here, why they're here. I let them know that I have a work for them to do, and here's my desire. Here's my intent. I want to work with them to accomplish these goals. The next step is contacting the spirit within the skull. You have to be able to have some type of spirit communication so you can know who you are. Who do you have here? Who are you going to work with? What's going on? Now, a lot of people, and I'm trying to fit all of this in a short period of time, a lot of people will want to consecrate and go through a ritual to consecrate their altar and to consecrate their skull and their ritual tools. I skipped over all of that. If you want a video on that, I can do a video on that, but there are plenty of books out there. I'm sure that you can get on consecrating your tools and taking them to the graveyard and burying them for 3 days. I try to do things that are practical. It's not practical for me. I'm going off on a little rant here for a second. To take my $1,500 skull and bury, pour rum over it, buried in a graveyard, some random graveyard, unless you own a graveyard, buried in a random graveyard for 3 days. It's not practical for me to take my altar slab and soak it in rum and bury it, set it on fire and then put it out and bury it for 3 days. I need to do something that is practical. And if you want to do a ritual, you can do that in your backyard. If you want to douse your wood, if you have a wood altar, you can douse that if you want with alcohol, with rum, and bury it in your backyard for 3 days if that's what you feel you need to do. And like I said, there are plenty of books out there. I'm sure there are videos out there that talk about that. I did not, and it's still effective. It still works for me. So, give it a try if that's what you decide to do. I am just doing things that have worked for me. That's what I'm telling you about. So I skipped over all of that other parts. Now you can always bless it. You can still, do what you need to do if you feel the need to bury it and go through the process. And I understand the point in doing that. I understand why you would want to do that. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's just not what I've done. It's not practical to me for you to come back and your skull has been dug up or anything happened to it. And so anyways, that's just my little rant. So, okay, so making contact with the spirit that's within the skull, which is what I did. I ended up I asked the name after introducing myself, and here's why, here's who I am, you're in a safe place, you're here amongst other spirits, you're here with me, basically introducing myself as the high priestess of the house. You introduce yourself as that. You introduce yourself as you're in charge, you're in control. You introduce yourself as that in a nice way, but stand in your strength and your power. I always do that with all of my items. And I've never had a problem. I'm going to do another video, by the way, on having control over the multiple spirits that might reside in your house and in your space, especially in a smaller space if you have a lot of tools and a lot of different things going on. But that's just a side note. Look out for that video coming soon. Okay, so let's make contact with the spirit in the skull. Find out what the name is, who that is that you're speaking to. I found out the name of this one skull that I was working with. and I wanted to know what happened. And I go to them as a caring soul, almost like a caretaker. Again, being a death walker and escorting those over and helping them find their space, their place in the realm of the dead. I come to them as a compassionate, caring soul. And I asked the spirit, what happened? I wanted to know what happened. And the spirit knew I meant what happened at death. And I saw what happened as a video. It was probably one of the clearest visions that I've ever seen. And it was clear that this person was basically tracked down, was hunted down at night at a club and killed in an alley by a few men. And I saw his head go down and hit the concrete. I want to say it was raining out or something. Men with money, really nice cars. I saw the whole thing. They had nice dress on, nice garb, nice suits. And I saw his head, bam, hit the back of the concrete. And, I had to be empathetic to that. You have to show some type of empathy to that. Well, I was curious, and I didn't notice it, but I got up and looked at the back of the skull, and sure enough, there was this indentation. Never even noticed it on any of the pictures, and even when I brought it home, until I ran my hand across where I thought the back would have hit as I saw it in the video that kind of played it in my mind. And I saw this indentation at the skull where he would have hit the ground. So to me, that was confirmation enough that the story he told me, that he showed me, was truth. So after all of that, now you have to ask yourself, for the work that you will be doing, will this spirit that you've just connected to, will it be a good fit for the work that you want to do? So in my case, if I have a work that I want to send this spirit to go after people who have cheated because he was cheated out of something, who have cheated, or who are slimy, or who are murderers, or anything to that effect, this would probably be a good spirit to send after somebody like that. So you have to make sure that it's a good fit, right? If your spirit was a female who was abused or raped, who do you think a good fit would be? Or what type of work do you think a good fit would be? Sure, send her after someone who might be a rapist, someone who might abuse women. So you have to fit the spirit and the working. And I have multiple skulls, so if he wasn't going to be a fit, then I would go to the next. Now, you can also invite other spirits into that skull and make that skull basically where other spirits would possess that skull. And that's a whole nother topic I'll get into, because this is running a little long already, for another day, where you would basically have the owner of the skull open the doorway for the other spirits to come in and possess that skull. So you can have it where it's a doorway, it's a gateway. That skull is a gateway now between for you and the other world, for you and the dead to now use this as your gateway. This skull as your gateway. So that's another story for another time. But yes, that can be done as well. In this case, I had the spirit that I wanted to use, and I had the spirit that was going to fit the working that I had. On the next video that I do, I'll talk to you about using, I'll probably talk to you, I'm going to think about it, about using this spirit, the pact that I made with the demon, and Haitian Voodoo after somebody. So let's see how that one goes. And that will probably be my next video or two. We'll see how that one goes. But I wanted to lay the foundation for you. I wanted to give you some basics on how I started, how everybody has a different way to do things. Don't try to just do it one specific certain way. Everybody's paths are different. Customize it to what you feel is the right thing to do or not. And also ensure you choose your skull by how you feel. Everything depends on you, on how you feel about the skull. You don't have to have a real skull. I almost forgot. You can use one that looks like, you know, it's a skull, but just not a real skull. You can do the same. That way you're not so worried about dousing it in rum and burying it somewhere. If you want to do that, if you have to set it on fire, whatever you need to do, you can do. And you won't worry too much if it does get stolen, because you didn't pay a whole lot of money for it as well. So you can substitute here. That's fine. What do you think they did? You know, if you have no money, or back in the days, you figure it out. You have to substitute and find an alternative. So that's just what we have to do. So be creative with it. Okay, well, I think that was probably enough for one video. I have a lot more. I just was trying to fit everything in, but I'll probably have to do another video for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video on working with skulls. This should give you a great start on choosing your skull, speaking to it, start meditating with animal skulls, and try to get in there with your spirit communication. Hear the story of the spirit, and then you'll be able to put it to work for you. Any questions, please comment down below. Any additions, feel free to add them in. There's no way I can catch everything in this video. So thank you again for watching. I appreciate you guys' support. See you next time.